We're returning with more godlike typing on more terrible Pokemon. As much as a solid type combination can carry Pokemon that aren't really impressive stats-wise, sometimes you have Pokemon that are so bereft of value that even sharing amazing typing that's made some of the best Pokemon in the game isn't enough to save them. So without further ado, let's jump right in, starting with Galarian Stunfisk. Ground Steel is resplendent with some of the most valuable resists and immunities in the game. As far back as Generation 2, Steelix was leveraging its electric immunity alongside a neutrality to ice to check those pesky legendary electric Zapdos and Raikou and their go-to hidden power. The typing also blessed it with longevity in the face of statuses, with immunities to both Thunder Wave and Toxic, and just got better as the gens went on. The quadruple rock resist that it used to shrug off Aerodactyl's choice banded rock slides in Gen 3 translated to a quadruple stealth rock resist in Gen 4, taking a mere 3.125%, which meant leftovers would actually out-heal it. Then Excadrill joined the Steel Ground fray in Gen 5, utilizing its Dragon Resist to great effect in not just OU but Ubers as well, with the Thunder immunity proving incredibly useful in the latter metagame. And then in Gen 6, it got even better with Steel's excellence against the newfound Fairy types, while Steelix upgraded to its powerful Mega Form. Both Pokemon made full extent of the typing's defensive possibilities. It was so good, in fact, that it made Excadrill a genuinely useful hit taker, despite its actual defenses not being very good. So Galarian Stunfisk, with its defense-focused stat spread, seems set to continue in this tradition. It actually resembled its two predecessors in that its speed stat was just above that of Steelix's, but if it was a good hit taker, that was easily forgiven. And in this regard, it had an HP stat almost identical to Excadrill's while having much higher defenses. It's much specially bulkier than Steelix too. It's also not a passive, offensively inept pure wall. Its attack isn't all that much lower than Steelix's, and it has the duel's eternal utility of Stealth Rock, as well as an immensely useful move they lack, Thunder Wave, and could even potentially dish out Sleep or at least force switches with the delayed status of Yawn. If it's got the typing and it's got the bulk and even utility to go with it, then why is G Stunfisk so ineffectual? Put simply, it lacks the ability to actually threaten the opponent in return, which makes it fodder for all manner of setup. Steelix is no wall breaker, but it has Roar, so not only can you not set up in front of it, it can actually be used to check boosting Pokemon as well, and it can even rack up hazard damage all over the opponent's team, turning its defensive excellence into an opportunity to force some useful damage. Additionally, in spite of its so-so attack stat, Steelix packs a powerful stab Gyro Ball, which weaponizes its low speed and hits the many fast Pokemon that it's tasked with taking on for excellent damage without needing super effective coverage. G Stunfisk isn't hitting anything without an Earthquake weakness and a dearth of physical bulk hard at all. This would perhaps be more acceptable if it had an ability that widened, if not its impact, its defensive reach. But the terrain-reliant type swap of Mimicry is almost always functionally useless. Steelix doesn't use Sturdy's built-in Focus Sash often, but the ability to take any hit at full health is superb in emergencies. G Stunfisk can switch into quite a bit quite well, but it doesn't do much of anything else, and that's just not enough. Now moving in a more offensive direction, we've got Poliwrath. Water Fighting is an amazing offensive stab combination and provides a seriously useful set of resists to switch in with. Keldeo rocked this to tremendous, controversial effect in multiple generations, an offensive behemoth that had an easy time switching in, resistant to Stealth Rock and Common Fire moves, and was immensely difficult to switch into itself while even packing useful defensive value against several opposing threats, which is much more than you usually get in such a potent wall breaker. Urshifu Rapid Strike was similarly effective and carried the torch to devastating effect in Gen 8, and in Gen 9, the initially overlooked Quaquaval wound up being quite ferocious. Even Aqua Paldean Tauros, though certainly a step down, is a serious threat. Water Fighting is immensely threatening because the two types are themselves among the most spammable stabs and not only offer a wide reach of superb options when combined, they go together beautifully. In addition to their many super effective hits and complementary neutral coverage, there's nothing like a water type that happily destroys Ferrothorn. However, way before Keldeo and its successor, there was the original water fighting type, and it's the worst of them all, Poliwrath. Okay, to call Poliwrath a bad Pokemon is perhaps on the harsh side. In addition to the usual excellence of its typing, it also has Water Absorb as an ability, which is not just a superb ability for devouring excessively strong water moves that would otherwise overwhelm its bulk, like Specs Hydro Pump in Rain or whatever else, but for making it a physical attacker immune to the dreaded Scald. That said, you certainly could never call it a good Pokemon either. All the benefits of its amazing typing tend to get flattened by the mediocrity of its stats. Base 70 speed isn't a game changer, but Poliwrath doesn't have the impact of a Breloom or Metagross where it can make that work. It's certainly got good bulk, but its offenses aren't quite sufficient to do that much in return with it. It's got some interesting tools in its move pool, but nothing really shattering enough to transcend its low starting point. Even when the stats were less mediocre by generational standards, it still never stood out. Part of this was the early gen lack of the physical special special split that meant it couldn't use Water Stab unless it wanted to employ its seriously underwhelming special attack stat, which made it even less effective. But even if it had been able to use its stronger attack, it wouldn't have been that impactful. Base 85 isn't very much for a Pokemon trying to dish out big damage. Poliwrath actually got an attack boost in Gen 6, going from base 85 to 95, and that would have helped early on, but still it also would have only done so much. It's solid, but just barely, and certainly not more, which is what Poliwrath needed to make up for the fact that it was so slow, and while its bulk was quite good, it was a far cry from impenetrable as well. Basically, by the time it got these buffs that it needed all along, it was too late. But then again, the buffs wouldn't have been that good even in what could potentially constitute a heyday. Base 95 attack Waterfall wouldn't have been bowling over anything, certainly not with its speed being what it is. It had some interesting tools in its move pool like Hypnosis, Encore, Bulk Up, but while it could put together an intriguing moveset, the impact would still be second rate at best, and usually less than that. Poliwrath still would have been, by quite some margin, the worst of a very good set of Pokemon, and sadly not even in the sense that it was good on its own and just had stiff competition. Nope, it was just almost completely lacking and thus unable to deliver on what little promise it did have. Now we're going to move on to another water type with Whiscash. Water grounds are among the most robust Pokemon of all. Swampert, Quagsire, Gastrodon, and even the less appreciated Seismitoad are all excellent, often defying the tiering system and how they're able to check some of the scariest Pokemon ever. This is in large part thanks to their typing. They've got the best of both worlds with such a tremendously synergistic combination. A water immune to electric and a ground not weak to water when they're not running a water immune ability anyway. Individually, waters and grounds are already among the best defensive types in the game, taking on many defining offensive pieces, but together they get even better. They become absolutely loaded with useful resistances. For example, a ground type that resists fire makes it much better at actually switching into something like Heatran, and considering their bulk, just as important were their many neutralities. In fact, though they're quadruple weak to grass, which is also their only weakness, and the water grounds are notorious for being nigh unbreakable for teams with one or no grass moves, it makes them superb utility Pokemon. Now, Whiscash has this typing, but isn't geared towards utility. Instead, it looks to go on the offensive route. Water ground is also great typing for dealing damage, as demonstrated by more attack-focused variants of Swampert, especially its Mega, and even the occasional offensive Seismitoad. Once again, two great individual stabs that work well in tandem, and their combined defense and utility provides myriad opportunities to fire those attacks off. But Whiscash has a tool that is the envy of the other water grounds, Dragon Dance. It's also got that high HP that's a classic characteristic of the water grounds. In fact, at base 110, it's got the second highest HP of them all, and it's only 1 point behind Gastrodon. Forget that low speed, its bulk will let it grab multiple Dragon Dances, which also compensates for its low attack. And all will be well, right? Not quite. Such awful speed and attack means even a Whiscash that Dragon Dances multiple times isn't going to be at all difficult to stop. It also doesn't have any physical ice coverage, not even Ice Fang, so it's completely stuffed by grasses. Never mind. But hey, not everything's meant to be a Dragon Dancer. You don't see Tropius trying to pull it off either, so Whiscash is bad offensively, big deal. What about defensively, like the other water grounds? Nope, not that either. It has no useful ability that would give it some extra value, nor does it pack any utility moves, not even Stealth Rock. Well, until Gen 9, where it got both rocks and spikes, but so did basically every other ground type at that point, including Quagsire and Gastrodon. And even if they hadn't, Whiscash had long since been eclipsed stats-wise, which besides its HP, had never been even decent to begin with. Whiscash wasn't frail at least, but it didn't have any other tools that would place it anywhere near the other water grounds. Its hidden ability Hydration, letting it shrug off status in the rain, was neat, and it made for a funny gimmick under the permanent drizzle of Generation 5, but even as far as gimmicks went, it was bad. Not ever used or even thought of unless dumpster diving was a hobby of yours, or unless you wanted to try and embarrass your friend by beating them with the worst Pokemon imaginable. Now we'll be taking things back into a more offensive direction with Flamigo. The fighting flyers are generally excellent. Halucha's Unburdened set was the game-ending stuff of nightmares. Galarian Zapdos' Defiant made it a physical attacker that punished the fog and outright welcomed Intimidate, and Mega Staraptor looks to make a solid mark in the next generation. Fighting and flying have beautiful synergy together. Defensively, fighting cancels out flying's Stealth Rock weakness, which enables the real star of the show, the offense. It's easy to spam powerful Brave Birds when those steels and rocks that resist it don't want to come anywhere near stab close combat. Most fighting resists don't take particularly kindly to the power of a strong neutral flying stab either. Then there's our pal, our buddy, our Flamigo. At first glance, it doesn't actually look bad at all. It's not lacking in power at all. In fact, it's far stronger than Halucha. At base 90 speed, it's not exactly slow either. This is perfectly workable on the right Pokemon. It also has an incredible advantage over its competitors in the Scrappy ability, which not only lets it freely close combat into ghost types, but blocks Intimidate. It's got U-Turn, it's got Swords Dance. Flamigo doesn't just have the typing, it's also very well equipped to destroy its opponents. So what's got it so down? Well, it is very frail. None of the fighting flyers are exactly bulky. In fact, Halucha is about equally frail. However, Hawlucha is also much faster, and as before, it activates its item and unburdened speed doubling that lets it explosively take over the game. G-Zapdos and Mega Raptor are also faster than Flamigo. Additionally, they're more well-rounded, as they have some actual genuine hit-taking ability, and to top it all up, they're much more powerful, while G-Zapdos also has the immense utility of switching into the Fog for the benefit of grabbing an instant, no setup turns required +2 attack boost that makes it genuinely impossible to switch into. Flamigo's Swords Dance can't hold a candle when it's both frail on the slower side, as even if it's not slow, it's lacking the same immediacy and is easier to take out in return, both from how it collapses to opposing damage more easily and misses out on some major speed benchmarks. It doesn't seem like that much of a gap in power, bulk, and speed between Flamigo and friends, but it's the fact that it's lesser in all three categories, each individual issue existing together and compounding the greater one. When you're frail alongside being lacking in speed or any sort of game-breaking attribute, then the good parts of fighting flying disappear, and Flamigo becomes just another hard hitter overshadowed by its flaws. Now, before we go to our grand finale, we've got a dishonorary duel to mention. Steel Fairy is a legitimate contender for the best typing in the game, alongside ground flying. Magearna and Zacian Crown may be extraordinary in other ways, but it is the utter perfection of two incredible defensive typings working in tandem that make them so apt at switching in and destroying everything in their path. Now, it would be wrong to call Mawile and Klefki bad in the same way the other Pokemon on this list are. Mawile was recognized as insufficient, and thus received the Mega as a much-needed upgrade. And indeed, its Mega form was one of the most broken of all of them, as its typing made it a cinch for it to switch in and unleash its wicked stabs. Klefki didn't receive such an upgrade, but in its debut generation, it was the best, most reliable answer to Xerneas, the hyper-broken destroyer of Ubers, while also answering other menaces in Darkrai and the Lati Twins. It's hard to call something with that resume bad, but yes, there's a reason these two have the honorable mentions. Base Mawile has the great typing alongside the tremendous Intimidate ability, alongside the superb utility of Stealth Rock and Knockoff, but it's incredibly slow, doesn't deal much damage, and isn't even that bulky physically when Intimidate isn't in effect thanks to its pathetic HP, while it's knocked over by a light breeze on the special side. Meanwhile, Klefki isn't anywhere near as good in a metagame beyond Uber. It may have that tier unlock as the most important, effective specialized check to possibly anything ever, but it didn't succeed outside that metagame thanks to its flaws, which were that for all the great support of Prankster Spikes and Thunderwave, it also dealt almost no damage and wasn't actually that bulky, again thanks to its awful HP. Both Pokemon's results, especially once Klefki was replaced as the Fairy Steel Xerneas answered by Magearna in Gen 7, were on the mediocre side, and it's certainly not for lack of opportunities, seeing as their typing generates that with more ease than perhaps anything else. Still, there's a reason they're honorary mentions and not as low as, say, Hisuian Gudra, our final pick. Dialga debuted Dragon Steel typing back in Gen 4 and demonstrated how extraordinary it is. First and foremost, a dragon not weak to Dragon is incredible, and unlike the later to come Dragon Fairy, it's neutral to Ice as well. Speaking of Fairy type, when that came around, the half Steel typing also made Dialga a dragon that was neutral to Fairy and had a super effective stab against them. The combination was overflowing with synergy. Beating a water and electric resistant and fire neutral Steel type was outstanding as well. Another Dragon Steel wouldn't come around until Generation 8, where Duraludon quickly and significantly underwhelmed its expectations, but Game Freak realized it was an unfinished Pokemon and gave it the evolution Archaludon in Gen 9, which was tremendous and made the most of the typing, so much so it was banned from OU. Then there's Hisuian Gudra, that other Dragon Steel made playable in Gen 9, or Steel Dragon if you're being pedantic, as a regional form of a pseudo-legendary that had promise, but had itself greatly overwhelmed in its Gen 6 debut for being too bland. A dedicated mono dragon introduced at the same time as the Fairy type, going half Steel seemed like a perfect remedy to bring the potential out of Gudra that had gone unrealized back then. Its new added types benefited, seeming ideal to give it a unique edge. As a bonus, H. Gudra could run Sap Sipper, which may seem redundant in light of its quad resistance to grass, but the ability provides an immunity to Leech Seed, one of the most irritating, potentially dangerous moves in the game, which you can never be too safe against. As a bonus, taking 0% from grass attacks is better than taking even 1%, especially when you can get an attack boost out of it for H. Gudra's newfound stab and heavy slam. Nevertheless, H. Gudra is not good. Rather, it drags. It has the exact same problems as regular Gudra. It's passive, which is surprising for a Pokemon with 110 base special attack and stab Draco Meteor, but yes, it's not threatening the opponent much after its great defensive typing lets it switch in, even though Meteor is supported by pretty much all the strong offensive coverage you could want. That resist laden typing also doesn't go too far when H. Gudra has no form of reliable recovery and is thus incredibly easy to wear down. It basically fails at leaving any sort of impact in its wake. In fact, it might be even worse than K. Gudra because it is slow. Colossian Gudra was no speedster, but base 80 was at least workable. H. Gudra, on the other hand, is slower, and by a lot, with a base 60 stat that's really just pitiful. H. Gudra's base HP is also lower, going from base 90 to 80, which is a significant drop off for a Pokemon already struggling with getting worn down. So even its outstanding special bulk is a little less, although not to any really notable extent. In this sense, it's the inverse of its nicely boosted defense, while H. Gudra takes physical hits markedly better. It's not enough to make any sort of real difference in its overall tanking ability, especially undermined as it is by the lower HP, as well as the fact that moveset or ability-wise, nothing has really changed with one of its primary problems, that of getting worn down. The newly gained Stealth Rock resistance is immediately nice, as is the Toxic immunity, but these advantages fall flat when they're dragged down by such lack of speed, power, or strong utility move options. Anything to really leave a mark on the battle. Something as simple as Wish wouldn't fix everything, but sure would go a long way. It even seems fitting design-wise. Its attack got boosted as well, but it's not hitting hard at all at base 100. Not that its low speed gives it much opportunity to actually hit that much. Being better into fairy types doesn't do enough for H. Gudra when you can just forget the fairy types and beat it with almost anything else instead. Ultimately, H. Gudra falls because it is just a tepid K. Gudra reskin, and K. Gudra was already a thoroughly tepid Pokemon. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Gameslayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Seagulls Incorporated, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Gyleria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Tyler, Kiboflu, Wardine, Zathor, for their major support of our videos.